Hello everyone, my name is Shana Khan Yusufzai and I am a Microsoft certified trainer at GTech Learn. Today I am going to deliver a webinar on Azure architectural components. This webinar will be of 45 minutes in which the last 5 minutes will be for the questions and answers. Let us discuss the agenda of today's webinar. We will be first seeing the Azure architectural components, the brief concepts which will explain the various components which are used by Azure for its architecture. Then we will see the top level concepts, and then we will see the practical. We will see a walkthrough through the Azure portal, where we will be exploring the different services offered by the Azure portal. And then we will have a Q&A round in which we will see the questions and answers. The top level concepts which will be covered in this 45 minutes webinar will be regions and region pairs, availability zones, Azure resource groups and Azure resource managers, subscriptions and Azure management groups. All these topics will be discussed in brief in the next few minutes. Now first coming to the Azure regions. What do you understand by region? Whenever we talk about region, what do we understand? See, like if we in our day-to-day language, we see that we have different continents in the world, and those continents can also be taken as regions like Asia, like Australia, like Europe, US. Similarly, if we see, if we talk about Azure, which is a cloud computing platform offered by Microsoft, it is made up of data centers which is located all around the globe. And whenever we are using any service from Azure, like we are using, suppose we are deploying a virtual machine or we are creating a SQL database, then these services or resources are being deployed in any of these locations which is available across our whole globe. So we see that those specific data centers, they are not exposed to the users directly, but instead of that, Azure organizes them into different regions. So we can call a region as a geographical area on the planet that will contain at least one, but it can be multiple also, but at least one data center which is nearby and networked together with a low latency network. That means in a region there will be at least one data center, though it can be multiple. It depends that how many data centers we are having in that region. What is the work of Azure? Azure very brilliantly assigns and controls the resources within each region, and it ensures that all the workloads are balanced in a proper way. Like Azure will look for the resources which are deployed in each region. Regions, we will divide the whole globe into different regions, and in those regions we will be having the data centers of Azure, which will be balancing all the work which is happening on the cloud of Azure. So if we see, there are a few examples of regions. We have West US, we have Canada Central, we have East Asia, then we have Australia East, Japan West, Europe West. You can see the list of all these regions whenever you go and deploy any resource in the Azure portal. Like if you are deploying a virtual machine, suppose it will ask that in which region you want to deploy your machine. Sitting in India, you can deploy that machine in West US or in Japan too. So there are different regions available in this figure. You can see this figure is available from June 2020, and the different Azure regions can be seen here in this figure. So why are these regions so important? You see that Azure is a cloud computing platform which is providing global regions other than any other cloud provider. Like it is providing the largest number of global regions. If we talk about the other cloud platforms provided by different other companies, Azure will be giving the maximum number of global regions. And these regions, they help us, the people who are working on the cloud, to bring the applications closer. That means we can work from any region, sitting in any region from at any instant of time. Also, using this regions, it provides the option of scalability and redundancy. That is, you can scale up your machines, you can scale up the resources which you are using. Like you can deploy a multiple number of identical VMs in the same regions. Then it also provides redundancy. How? We will see in the next few slides that how it is going to provide redundancy. Azure also has some specialized regions which build their own applications for compliance or legal purposes. Like we have United States DOT Central, United States Government of Virginia, United States Government of Iowa, and many more. They are some specialized regions which deals with the compliance and legal purposes. Next, if we move to region pairs, what is a region pair? Before talking about region pairs, let us first understand about availability zones. What do you understand by availability zones? Suppose you have created your work in a data center which is located in some region of the globe, and due to some natural disaster, that data center is failed because of a natural disaster, or maybe because of power outage, that data center fails. Then how you will continue your work on the cloud? So for that, availability zone is the best option. Azure is providing us the feature of availability zone to provide the protection against downtime due to any type of center failure, whether it is power outage based, whether it is natural disaster based, or whatever reason it is, it will provide the protection against that downtime. So it ensures, basically these availability zones, they are ensuring that your services and data is redundant, so you can protect your information in case of any type of failure. So it is basically providing the feature of redundancy which we just talked about. If we talk about availability zones, they are physically separate data centers within an Azure region. Now see that we have Azure region. In that Azure region, we will have availability zones. Minimum 3 availability zones should be there in any region. Then those Azure regions will have data centers. That data centers can be one or multiple number of data centers. So we have region. In regions, we have availability zones, and in availability zones, we have the data centers located. And each data center which is available with the availability zone will have its own independent power, cooling, and networking infrastructure. So that if one zone goes down because of any reason, the other zone is continue to work. So that is why these availability zones are established in the same region. So if any one availability zone is going down, you can see here in the figure, this is a Azure region. We have 3 availability zones here, and these availability zones are also connected to each other, and that connection is done through high speed private fiber optical cables or networks. So these availability zones, each one of them will have their independent power, cooling, and networking infrastructure. So you can use this availability zones in your wraps also. They are primarily used for virtual machines, managed disks, load balancers, SQL database. Azure services which supports availability zones, they generally fall into 3 categories. Okay, if we see the 3 categories which the Azure services supports are, we have zonal services, we have zone redundant services, and then we have non-regional services. If we see about each service, then zonal services, whenever you make a resource, you pin that resource to a specific zone. Like you have made a virtual machine, then you have to pin that virtual machine. Virtual machine is a resource. You have to pin it to a specific zone. Then you have zone redundant services. This is a platform which replicates automatically across the zones. That means automatic replication is provided in zone redundant services. If we talk about non-regional services, then services are available from Azure geographies, and they are resilient to zone-wide outage as well as region-wide outage. So these are the 3 services that support availability zones. Now, if we come to the Azure region pairs, See, availability zones we just talked about, they are created by using one or more data center. And we know there are minimum of 3 zones within a single region. Okay. Now, there's a possibility that a large disaster could cause an outage which is big enough to affect the 2 data centers. That's why the concept of region pairs came. That means if the outage is very big, then in that condition, what will happen? How are you going to protect your services on the cloud? Then this concept of region pair comes. Each Azure region is paired with another region within the same geography. That means, like in US, we will have a region pair of East US and West US. Similarly, we have US East 2 and Central US. If you come to UK, you can see that UK West has a region pair in UK South. That means every region has having the another region pair within the same geography except Brazil South. If you see Brazil South, it has a region pair in South Central US. So rest all are paired within the same region, within the same geographical region, and they should be at least 300 miles away. That means the distance between these two region pairs should be at least 300 miles. And using these region pairs, we are able to replicate our resources like virtual machines, the storage devices which we are creating on the cloud. We are easily able to replicate them across a geography, and replicating it increases the chance of redundancy. That means if there is chances of any interruptions or any failures because of natural disaster, because of civil unrest, because of power outage, or because of physical network outage, then in that case, at least the replication which we have done is available with any in is available with the second region which is paired with it. So it provides redundancy feature, and uh, it provides continuous access to the services on the cloud. So you have seen all about region pairs here. Next, if you see that what are the other advantage of using region pairs? The first advantage we saw, it provides redundancy, then it minimizes the downtime in the case of application outage, and it is very important if we talk about continuous data, dealing with data on the cloud. Because if because of any reason, if this continuity is not maintained, then the whole system will fail, because we are working on cloud. So we have to maintain that continuity along with the security and integrity. Okay, next, geographies. I have already talked what is geography. It is discrete markets that preserve the data residency and compliance boundaries. And geography will have at least 2 or more regions. Like if we are talking about America, we are talking about United States of America, it will have 2 or more regions like US West, US East, Central US. Similarly, for if Europe is a geographical area, it will have 2 or more regions like UK South, UK East. Similarly, for different geographical regions, we will have 2 or more regions. Such geographical areas are like US, UK, Asia Pacific, Middle East, Africa. So this is allowing the customer with specific data residency and compliance needs to keep their data and applications in close proximity. So this was about geographies. In geography, so if you see the hierarchy, it is like geographies, then we have in geographies we will have regions, in regions we will have availability zones, in those availability zones we will have different region pairs and data, and in those different region pairs we will have data centers. So the hierarchy will be something like this. This is telling us about the availability options, that including the region pair, how we are increasing the availability option from 99.9% to 99.99%, because now we have used the feature of availability zones where we are replicating our resources to different region pairs, so that if one region pair is failing, the other one is continuously providing the service to its users. Next, we will be coming to Azure Resources and Resource Manager and Resource Manager groups. So if we talk about resources, resource resources are components, like whatever service we are going to use on the Azure portal, like the storage, the virtual machines, the networks that are available to build the cloud solutions. These are all called resources, or you can say a manageable item that is available through Azure. Next, we have resource group. Resource group, basically it is a logical container which holds your resources. That means you need to deploy each resource in a resource group. Without a resource group, you cannot be able to deploy a resource in the cloud. So the resource group includes the resources that you want to manage as a group, and you have to decide in which resource group are you going to put your resource. So resource group is basically a logical reasoning, logical grouping, the logical grouping can be based on the usage, based on the type. On that basis, you can do the groupings of the different resources. So you can see here we have virtual machine is also a resource, storage account, virtual network, app services, SQL databases, Azure functions. These all are resources. If we talk about resource groups, they are the basis of the Azure platform. And as I have already told that it is a logical container for the resources which we are deploying on Azure. And using these resources, you can create anything in an Azure subscription, like a VM, like a Azure application gateway, Azure Cosmos DB instance, whatever you want to create, you can create using the resources available on the Azure portal. But remember that all resources must be in a resource group, and a resource can only be a member of a single resource group. That means you cannot keep the same resource in different resource groups. The parent resource group for any resource will be only one. Though you can move the resources between various resource groups, but they will be associated with only one resource group at a time. And also remember that resource groups can never be nested. So this was about resource groups, which tells us about the logical grouping. And that logical grouping is done, that logical grouping of the resources is done based on the similar type or location or usage. The next is, if you talk about the life cycle, if you are no longer using a resource, you can directly go to the resource group. And if you delete the resource group, all the resources which you deployed in that resource group will automatically be deleted. So instead of deleting all the resources separately, go to the resource group directly, and it will delete all the resources which were present in that resource group. This is basically done to minimize the costs, because if you are not using any resource, there is no need of keeping it. So better delete it on the cloud platform. Also, the main feature of resource groups is that it applies role-based access control permissions. If you are applying a role-based access control to a resource group, you at the means I want to say that at the resource group level, you are applying the role-based access control. This RBAC feature, it enables role-based access to the users. That means each user will only be given permissions to access the things which he needs to access. Every facility, service, and app he will not be able to use. This is role-based access control is basically done to enhance the security feature on the cloud. So these permissions are also applied at the resource group level. Next, if we come to the Azure Resource Manager, then ARM, it is the deployment and management service for Azure. Basically, it is a management layer which enables us to create, update, and delete the resources in my Azure account. And also you can use the management features. Management features, when we talk about, what comes in our mind, like access controls, logs, and tags to secure your resources after the deployment. So ARM is basically providing that management layer. Now see in this figure how this ARM works. Whenever a user is sending a request, that request can be sent from any of the Azure tools. Like here you can see we have mentioned in the diagram that we are sending the request through the Azure tools like Azure Portal, PowerShell, CLI. which comes in software development kit or SDK or REST client, what happens? This request goes to the Azure Resource Manager. The Azure Resource Manager, which in short is known as ARM, it authenticates and authorizes the request, and then after authentication and authorization, it sends the request to the Azure service. And that Azure service, like we have, you can see here, data store, web app, virtual machine, service management, whatever service was requested by the user, to that the request will be transferred from the ARM to that service, and then the necessary action will be taken. So this is how the ARM or Azure Resource Manager works. Whatever facilities or capabilities are available in the Azure portal, the same capabilities are also available with the PowerShell and the Azure command line interface and the REST APIs and the client software development kits also. So you can use those platforms to send your request to the ARM. ARM will authenticate, authorize it, and send it to the service, and the service will take the necessary action. And in this way, you will be granted access to the service. Now, what are the other benefits of using Resource Manager? Azure Resource Manager, it manages your infrastructure through declarative templates. And these declarative templates are already available on the Azure portal, and they are in the form of JSON file, which is a JavaScript object notation file. That means the templates which we will be directly using, those templates are pre-built in Azure Cloud Platform, and they are built on JSON platform, JSON file format. By using ARM, you give access control to all the services, because the role-based access control is applied at the resource manager level, resource group level. So access control can be done easily. You can apply tags to the resources to logically organize them. Like, what is the use of tags? Suppose if I have put in a tag that you need a tag on each resource group, and the value of tag is environment. Suppose I have put the value of the tag as environment, or suppose I have put the value of the tag as IT department. So every resource which we are creating in that specific resource group on which we have applied the tag should need a tag in order to be deployed in that resource group. So we can logically organize all the resources in our subscription by applying tags to them. Tags can be applied on resource group level. Also, you can clarify your organization's billing by viewing cost for a group of resources that share the same tag. Now, suppose we created a tag of IT department, we can also be able to create now the organization billing for that IT department separately. So giving different tags to different departments, we can do the billing of each department separately. All these things are possible because of the Azure Resource Manager. Next, if you talk about Azure Subscriptions, the Azure subscription, it provides you with authenticated and authorized access to Azure products and services. Without Azure subscription, you will not be able to build an account on Azure. That means subscription is necessary in order to avail the facilities available on the cloud or available with the Azure cloud services. Technically speaking, an Azure subscription is a logical unit of Azure resources that links to an Azure account. That means a logical unit which is linking you to an Azure account. Now, an account can have one subscription also, it can have multiple subscription also. And it can have different billing models, and to which you apply different access management. Like, for suppose an account is having different subscriptions. Okay, now for each subscription you will be generating different billing models, you will be applying different access policies to different subscriptions. So you are basically defining the boundaries around the different Azure products by using the Azure subscriptions. Basically, there are two types of subscription boundary. One is billing boundary, and the second one is access control boundary. Let us talk about this in detail. What is billing and access control boundary? If we talk about billing boundary, It determines how an Azure account is built for using Azure. Like you can create multiple subscription for different type of billing requirements. Like suppose you have an organization and there are various teams like the HR team, the administrative team, the product testing team. Then you better apply different subscriptions to different team and do the different billings for the different teams. So for HR, I am providing a different subscription. For the administrative team, I am providing a different subscription. For the development and testing team, I am providing a different subscription. So for each subscription, I will also be generating a different billing report and invoice. So a structured organization is management is possible by using these subscriptions, because one account can have multiple subscriptions, but vice versa is not possible. Remember that. Similarly, if we are talking about access control boundary, the access management policies, those are also applied at the subscription level. If we have applied some type of access management policy at the subscription level, all the resources which are coming under that subscription level, they will inherit that access policy. Like suppose you have a business and you have different department to which you are applying distinct Azure subscription policy. Then what happens? The billing model allows us to manage and control access to the resources that users provision with that specific subscription. That means the same thing which I told, that the organizational structure can be maintained in a very good way by providing different subscriptions to different units of an organization and then generating different invoice or billing for the different departments. Now you can also create additional subscriptions. Why you need to create additional subscriptions? Sometimes there is a first thing which we talked about, billing, that if you need different billing from different department, you need to create multiple subscription. Then for organizational structure, because you can using the role-based access control capability, you can maintain the organizational structure in a more secured way, in a more enhanced way. So giving the role-based access policies at the subscription level will solve this problem. Then the subscription limits, because sometimes there are, not sometimes but always, there is a limitations on subscription. Like if we see for example, the maximum number of Azure Express route circuits per subscription is 10. So if you need 11th express route circuit, you can't do, because per subscription the limit is 10. Now for the 11th one, you need to take a new subscription. So there are limits in the subscriptions and that should be considered while you are working with in your account. So if there is a need to go over those limits in some particular case, then you might need additional subscriptions. So this is also a thing that why we need additional subscriptions. Now see, here we have a figure which will explain things in a more detailed way. This is a customized billing infrastructure in an organization. See, here you have multiple subscriptions. What we have done, we have organized those multiple subscriptions. See the below lower diagram. We have organized them into invoice sections, and each invoice section is a line item on the invoice that shows the charges which is occurring in that month. For example, like you need a single invoice for your organization, but you want to organize the charges, single invoice you want, but you want to organize them by department, team or project. So depending on your need, you can set up multiple invoices within the same billing account for different department, team or projects. And for that, we are creating additional billing profiles, and each billing profile is having its own monthly invoice and payment method. So this diagram elaborates this thing very clearly, that how different Azure subscription is related with the invoice section, and those invoice sections are connected to the billing profile, and all these to one billing account. This is possible with the help of using different subscriptions. Now next, coming to the management group. Suppose your organization is using many, you can understand management groups. Just take an example, like you have a organization running. Okay, now you have many subscriptions in that organization. So you need a way to efficiently manage all the policies, access control and compliance for those subscriptions. So to do that thing in an efficient way, Azure Management Groups comes into light. It provides a level of scope above subscriptions. What do? You organize the subscriptions into the containers which are called management groups. In the same way like you organize the resource groups, the resources into the resource groups, and you organize the resource groups into subscriptions. Similarly, you are going to organize the subscriptions into the management groups. So it is the topmost level of hierarchy if we talk about. So whatever all the subscriptions, whatever policies you are applying on the management group level is automatically going to inherit in all the subscriptions and all the resource groups under those subscriptions and under all those resources on the in the resource groups. So any policy which you are applying here at the management group level, it is going to be inherited by all the lower hierarchies. Like suppose you have created a policy to a management group that is limiting the regions available for the creation of the virtual machines. Then what will happen? This policy would be applied to all the management groups, subscriptions, and resources under that management group. So better than applying the policy at the lower level, it is always practical and easy, and you can say good to apply that policy at the topmost level, and the topmost level here is the management group. What else we need to know about management groups? Okay, maximum 10,000 management groups can be supported in a single directory. That means you can create 10,000 management groups in a single directory. Also, a management group tree, it can have up to 6 level of depth, which does not include the root level or the subscription level. So you can see how deep this hierarchy is. Then each management group and subscription can support only one parent. That means each management group will be only associated to one parent, but each management group can have many children. So remember that each management group, one parent, but many children. And all subscriptions and management groups are within a single directory in each, are within a single hierarchy in each directory. So how you can manage things at the topmost level, here you have seen. Now next we will be walking through the Azure portal and exploring some features. Let us come to the, let me stop my screen. Okay. Let me share my screen 1 second. Okay. So now we are on the Azure portal, and now I'm going to take a walkthrough through this portal and see the various services available. So first thing, I am logged into this account on portal.azure.com using my Outlook ID. You can see my Outlook ID here, it is displayed. Here you can see this section is the feedback section. From here we can provide feedback. This section will take us to the support and troubleshooting, where we can see the various issues we encounter when we create or deploy any service on the Azure portal. This is for the settings section. Whatever settings you want to configure, you can go through this. Here we have the notification sections. The various activities you perform will be seen here in the notification section. Like if you created a virtual machine, then here it will show that creating a virtual machine. Once the machine is created, it will be shown that your machine is created. So you can check the notification center and see various activities going on in the portal. This features tells us about the active directories plus subscriptions. Like now the active directory here is the default directory. The domain is given, the directory ID is also given. You can see that here in the dashboard, various sections are provided where you can see your language region. Language is English, regional format is US. Similarly, everything you can explore from the various sections here. Next, Here is the Cloud Shell section. By clicking on this, this will take you to the Bash shell or PowerShell, whatever you want to use. From here you can use. First, before using it, you have to create a storage here. Like suppose I'm showing you here that I have created a storage. So from here we can access the PowerShell and the command line interface. That is the Bash section of the Azure portal, where we directly give commands and deploy different services which we want to in the portal. Let me close that. This is taking time. We have less time available now. So this is the search bar. Whatever service you want to search for, you can search here. Like suppose if you want to create a virtual machine, simply you write virtual machines here, virtual machines, and see the option is available. You can click here and go to that service. I already created a virtual machine here, so it is showing here in the section. You can create a new one from here. Let me take you back to the home page. You can also search for the various services from this section of all services. See, all the services are given here. This search bar was to minimize the time for searching any service. Just type and find the service you want to use. Otherwise, if you want to explore the various services, you can explore it from here. Like see, general services, then we have compute services, then we have networking services, then we have storage services, web services, container, mobile, database, AI, machine learning, and long list of services is available here, which you can explore and use. Let us go back to this page. Here it is showing all the recent resources which I had made. Like I had made a virtual machine. If you can see, I made a resource group, a container instance, a resource group, and the last view time also is being mentioned here. So this is showing all the recent resources which I have used on my portal. Then here also it takes you to the same dashboard of home, services, your favorites, and these services are also available. If you see here on this page, the subscriptions will take you to the page that what subscription I am using. Like here I am using Azure Pass sponsorship, which is active. This is a pass which I am using now. Similarly, there are different sections, resource groups which you have created. It will take you to the page. I have this many resource group created earlier. It is showing in which regions I have created all resources dashboard. Then you have different tools where you can learn everything online. Microsoft Learn, it is a very cool feature where you can learn Azure with free online training from Microsoft. So explore this feature if you want to learn different things from on Azure. Then we have Azure Monitor, which monitors your apps and infrastructure, and it tells about the health of the Azure services which you are using. Then we have Microsoft Defender for Cloud, which secure your apps and infrastructure. It is basically a security service provided by Microsoft. Then we have cost management section where you can analyze and optimize your cloud spend for free. Like what will be the cost management of the different services which you are using, you can check it from here. Then there are other useful links like the technical documentations which will tell about each service. Then migration tools, find an Azure expert, you can talk with an expert about your issues. Then recent Azure updates will be shown here. Here we have a quick start center. This will take you to the mobile app. If you are using an iPhone, you can access from the Apple iStore. If you are using Android, from Google Play, you can install the Azure mobile app service. So this is all about the Azure portal. Now let us move to the question and answers round. Okay, so we discussed the top level concepts. We have seen the demo of the Azure portal. Now moving to the, okay, this by scanning this QR code here or registering on the link provided, you can check for the upcoming events by our organization GTech Learn. So this is the URL for that, and this is the QR code which you can scan and see the list of the upcoming events. Now let's move to the question and answer session. Well, thanks for attending the webinar. We will be moving to the question and answers now. The first question, which logical unit of Azure services links to an Azure account? Just now we saw that Azure subscription is a logical unit which connects you to the Azure account, because if you don't have an Azure subscription, you will not be able to avail the capabilities of the Azure account. If you see the next question, what features of Azure can be used to manage governance across multiple Azure subscriptions? So the answer is very clear, Azure management groups, because we have to logically contain these subscriptions also somewhere at a top level. For that we use management groups. So one management group can have multiple subscriptions, and whatever properties and policies we are applying on that management group will be automatically inherited by all the subscriptions under that management group. The next question, what will happen if Azure does not provide availability zones facility? Well, if we are not having the capability of availability zones available on Azure Portal. Suppose if one data center fails because of some type of natural disaster or power outage or networking failure, then the user will not be able to use the cloud infrastructure for their services, for their applications. But if the data is stored somewhere else also in some other region, if it is replicated, then in case of any failure of one data center, the other data center is available for the user to provide access to the different services on the cloud. So that is why availability zones facility is a very beautiful feature which is offered by Azure in order to ensure the continuous access of data by the users around the globe. So this is very important to provide redundancy. So that was all about today's webinar. We discussed the regions, the availability zones, the geographical areas. We talked about resources and resource groups. We saw how subscriptions and management groups are applied to a Azure tenant. And then we saw the walkthrough through the Azure portal, and then we discussed the questions and answers. So thank you so much for attending this webinar. Have a nice day.